Sure, we're going to work here. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Aphid Talk. We're Adam and I here with you this morning, and I got to have one more thing. Sorry. Our high-tech system here of getting things set up. Got a computer sitting on top of a styrofoam cooler with a special prop underneath it to tilt the back of the screen to make it just right. So anyway, good morning. Welcome. We're here with you live on Ask the Agronomist, and I jokingly said aphid talk because we're going to spend a lot of time here this morning talking about aphids. Also want to give a disease update, talk a little bit about yield components of yield and what's going to drive yield from here on out in corn and soybeans, or what could detract from yield from here on out in corn and soybeans. I got Adam here with me producing, and hopefully we'll get lots of questions this morning, and we'll deviate from my list of things to answer your questions. So we'll start with aphids. And if you haven't been out in cornfields, you maybe haven't seen aphids. If you've been paying attention to what people are talking about, there's an aphid plant there. You can just walk into virtually any cornfield and find individual plants. If your pressure is not super intensely high, that's a little better one there. Those green critters there are the aphid, and the white, those are not eggs. Those are shed exoskeleton skins. As the aphid grows, it sheds its skin somewhat like a snake, and those white things there look kind of like a little fly, or some sort of speck of debris or something. Or some people think they're eggs. They're not eggs. Aphids don't lay eggs. We'll talk about the fascinating life cycle biology of aphids. The good Lord was feeling creative when he made aphids. They are, and I've learned a lot about them in the last week. I learned more about them yesterday. I kind of embarrassed myself in front of a colleague, not knowing what the winged female aphid looked like, and we'll talk about that as well. But they're a fascinating critter. Fortunately, they're usually not a big problem for us. This is the worst aphid year I've seen in the 31 or 2 years I've been doing this. We had quite a few in 2019. They tend to, I think we create a little better habitat for them when we have a lot of acres of later planted corn. And I think they're trending to be worse this year in parts of the state that have more corn planted after Mother's Day. But that's not, that's not a perfect rule. I think you could potentially have a bad field of them anywhere. And if you do have a bad field, depending on the stage of growth of the plant, we may need to treat for them. And treating for aphids is not, super simple, because a lot of the insecticides that we would typically include with fungicide application are not going to give very effective control of aphids. And it's kind of dangerous to only partially kill your aphids, because their population can explode so quickly. And when you do spray, you probably are going to do a better job killing the beneficial insects, which are eating the aphids, than you do killing the aphids themselves. So in some cases, if we don't get good control of them because we maybe didn't use the right product, or we just got a little bit unlucky, you can inadvertently make the problem worse by doing an ineffective treatment. So aphids start out, they overwinter as an egg. And that is the only time that aphids lay eggs. At the end of the growing season, the female aphid will, the aphid, there are no male aphids, believe it or not. So you might wonder where the aphid babies come from. We'll talk about that. So the aphid at the end of the growing season, and don't ask me how they know it's the end of the growing season, but nature nature, insects, animals, critters, they're able to sense things. They know things. They're adapted. So anyway, somehow at the end of the season, they know it's time to, move out of the cornfield, go find some place to lay eggs, and they overwinter as an egg. Now they cannot overwinter this far north. And I have a little bit of a theory that part of the reason they're so bad this year might have something to do with our mild winter. And did they overwinter more successfully than they normally do? Meaning, did we start out the season with a higher population than normal? Or did we start out the season with a population further north than normal? Or, they're basically, winter kills aphids. Natural predators eat aphids. Fungal pathogens infect and kill aphids. And so basically, aphids are killed by winter, other insects that feed on them, and fungal pathogens. And something in that system did not control aphids as well as it normally does. And possibly we just created it, not intentionally, but we accidentally created really good habitat for aphids, and they have just thrived. But anyway, those those eggs will hatch into a winged female. That winged female will fly somewhere, give birth to live young. So the only time they lay eggs is at the end of the season. Every other time they reproduce, and they reproduce basically through cloning, because there is no sexual reproduction with an aphid, because there are no boy aphids, as I said, they're all females. They are born pregnant, and every aphid they have is born pregnant. So they can reproduce very quickly. So that winged female aphid flies to some place that looks good to her. Now, we don't really understand. There are hybrid differences. There are hybrids that they seem to prefer, and whether or not that's because it's more attractive to the female aphid that's flying around looking for a place to lay her young, or is there something about the food that hybrid provides to them that they like better? And I was talking to a colleague yesterday. He even wondered, is that female aphid, is she just randomly choosing a place, or can she feed a little bit somehow and kind of sample the buffet, so to speak, and decide this is where I want to, rear my young. So we don't really understand how they choose where they go, but there are definitely things that they prefer. A couple DeKalb hybrids that, I'll call out that, have tended to have more aphid pressure. One of them is a brand new hybrid that we're very excited about, 114.99 VT4 Pro. They seem to enjoy that one. 66, 17, and 18 is a hybrid that tends to have a little more pressure in it. And an older hybrid that the last year we had bad aphids was 2019, and we observed this hybrid really got, attracted a lot of attention from aphids in 2019, is our old 6434. A lot of you might be using it as a conventional these days, 6432. But those would be hybrids to pay a little bit closer attention to, but don't lull yourself into thinking, oh, if I don't plant those hybrids, I don't have to worry about it, because that is absolutely not the case. And those hybrids are not bad everywhere, and those hybrids are not the only hybrids that can get bad. So it's just kind of a little bit of an observation we've had. So anyway, that winged female lays an aphid somewhere, and that aphid lives where it was laid until it's either eaten by another insect, killed by a pathogen, or dies from some other causes. Or the other thing that can happen is when they get overcrowded, and when they get highly populated, which they are, if they get overcrowded and they need to be able to move, because the aphid can't move off the plant that it's on. It's not going to crawl down the stalk, crawl across the ground, and climb up another plant next row over, or even move from plant to plant within the same row. So that normal aphid is going to stay on the plant that it was born on, unless it gets so crowded there. Again, fascinating biology of aphids. A response they have to overcrowding is they become a wing female again, and they can fly away, go someplace else, spread themselves, and start a new colony on another plant someplace else. So once again, just amazing biology and nature of what that aphid is able to do. And then it starts that process all over again. And, they can cause damage, at any stage of growth. They cause the most damage when they get in younger corn that is less mature. So they tend to be all over the tassel. They tend to congregate towards the top of the plant. A lot of people worry about them interfering with pollination, and they probably do interfere with pollen shed on those plants that they're heavily infested. Now, those plants have still got silks. Those plants can capture pollen from other plants that don't have aphids in the tassel. So I don't personally believe that it's pollination that they typically disrupt. The way they hurt the corn plant is every one of those little devils is living like a parasite off of your corn plant. They don't have biting, chewing mouth parts. They're not actually feeding on the plant. They stick their proboscis into the plant and basically suck sap out of the corn plant. So the sugars that the corn plant's producing through photosynthesis, that's what the aphid's living on. So it's getting moisture, food and moisture from the corn plant. And if you imagine, a million aphids on a corn plant, that plant is feeling a level of stress that is worse than probably any drought we've ever had. Now, if the corn plant is already drought stressed, they hurt it even worse. But even in irrigated fields, even in areas that have had 4 inches of rain in the last 3 weeks, even in areas that have zero drought stress whatsoever, aphids are causing kernels to abort. In severe cases, the plant will abort the entire ear. And I, my threshold is if you've got a lot of plants that are completely covered, just kind of think in your mind, 50% yield hit on those heavily infested plants. So if you've got 2% of your plants heavily infested, you're losing 1% of your yield. We can probably live with that. If you got 10% of your plants heavily infested, you're losing 5% of your yield across the field. That's starting to add up to enough bushels that you might want to think about something. You start getting up to 20, 30, 40, 50% of plants heavily infested, and there are fields out there that would reach that point, you're talking real bushels that we're losing. I had let's see if I can get this picture to pull up on my phone. I had a dealer send me a picture. Yeah. So I got that picture yesterday from a dealer in Tazewell County, and that's an ear that's about 50% aborted, and the rest of it might still abort too. Up until R3, which is roasting ear stage, that would be an R2 ear there. So you can still abort kernels off of an R2 ear. And that's the damage that aphids are doing. They also, another way they damage the plant, the honeydew that they produce, which is just the basically the extra that they're taking from the plant that they don't need, they secrete that all over the leaves. And it's just nasty. If you walk into a field that's full of aphids, you're going to get goo and gunk all over you, and you're just going to feel scummy when you come out of that field. Those corn leaves that are covered with honeydew, that is going to attract a lot of dirt, fungal pathogens, sooty mold. Those leaves will eventually turn black, and a black leaf probably is not very effective at photosynthesis. So it kind of doesn't matter that the leaf can't photosynthesize, because the plant probably doesn't have much of an ear anymore by the time the aphids get done with it. So it's a little bit irrelevant. The ear, they didn't lose the ear because of the black leaves. The ear's gone and the leaves are black because of the damage caused by the aphid. But there's lots of ways that aphids can reduce yield in corn. And the reason we typically don't worry about them is because they're in 1 or 2% of the plants in your field. And they absolutely ruin the 1 or 2% of plants in your field that they're in. What's making them so dangerous this year is, in some cases, they're in 50% of the plants in your field. So, we've talked a lot about disease. We'll talk about diseases here in a bit. Frankly, I'm shocked at how little disease we are finding in this crop, how healthy this crop has stayed in spite of the moisture that we've had. It looked like drought was going to be a problem. We thought disease was going to be a problem. Who knew? Aphids is probably, at this point in time, aphids is the number one yield limiting factor in the corn crop in Illinois. Aphids are absolutely going to take bushels away from the Illinois corn crop this year, either because we didn't control them, we didn't know we needed to control them, we controlled them too late, or we controlled them ineffectively. It's not necessarily going to make our corn bad, because if you're starting at 280 and lose 40 bushel, well, that's 240. That's not bad. I didn't raise any 240 corn last year. Generally, I'm pretty happy with 240 corn. But if your 240 corn could have been 280, I kind of wish I had those other 40 bushels. And I have seen in past years, when we've had fewer aphids than we have this year, I have seen 40 and 60 bushel yield hits from severely infested hybrids, just from aphids. So they are a real, potential problem, and something that we need to respect as a pest of corn. If you think you've got high enough levels that you need to try to control them, you've got about 3 products, from the research that I have done. We lost Lorsban a few years ago, chlorpyrifos. That would have been my number one recommendation had we been able to use it. But we can't. Doesn't exist anymore. So malathion is good. Dimethoate is good. Bifenthrin is okay. Those are the 3 products that people that I talk to are using. Most people are using bifenthrin because it is the most commonly available. It's in a lot of products. It's something that we already normally use. And it is labeled for aphid control. And it generally costs less than malathion and dimethoate. Doesn't stink as bad. You're not going to attract the attention of your neighbors about, my God, what are you spraying? That smells awful. So a lot of people have used bifenthrin. I did talk to a colleague yesterday. He thought that their applications of bifenthrin had done a pretty good job controlling the aphids on the top of the plant. But if you had aphids all the way down the plant, it really only got the ones near the top. And in some severe cases, they're going back with a second application for aphids using malathion, which is probably a stronger product for aphid control. So just be aware that, if you've got a product that you typically use, check the label, talk to the manufacturer of that product, make sure that they're confident that it's going to do a good job controlling aphids. I would say make sure that aphids are on the label. If someone claims that something is going to control an insect and that insect is not on their label, I would be kind of suspicious of that. It might kill some, but I'm guessing it's probably not going to be a very complete kill if that manufacturer didn't even list corn leaf aphids on their label. So I guess be careful with what you're using. Be aware that if you don't need to spray for aphids, you shouldn't, because you can inadvertently, cause a very quick rebound in the population of aphids. They can reproduce faster than any other insect in the field. And if you kill everything but the aphids, you're just opening the door for the aphids to take over in that field. So we don't really want to be treating for them if we don't have to. If you have to, you should. And if you have to, and you do, make sure you use a product that is good on aphids. So, Adam, is there anything that you can think of that I missed there, or have we gotten any questions, or is that enough aphid talk for everybody today?
No, I haven't had any questions coming in yet. And off the top of my head, I'm not sure that I've got anything to add. I would maybe say that typically the most concentrated areas of aphids are around the outside edge
That's
of your
right.
field.
Yep.
So be sure to walk into your field a little bit more to see whether or not those concentrations
Yep.
exist as you walk farther into the field. Don't just
Yep.
look at the outside edge only, because you may find a lot along the outside edge,
Right.
and maybe not as much in the middle, but you might
Right.
too.
Right.
So,
Well, and I would say, if you don't see them on the edge, I'd still probably go in and look around and make sure you don't have that one weird field where they're more inside than there are on the edge. But if you don't see them on the edge, to Adam's point, pretty good chance that field doesn't have a problem, because they do tend to be worse on the edge of the field. One thing that I did discover yesterday, and this is where I embarrassed myself in front of my colleague by not knowing what a winged adult female aphid looked like. I was checking my yellow sticky traps for corn rootworm beetles, and they were absolutely covered with what I naively referred to as a gnat. I didn't really think they were gnats, but I didn't know what they were, so that's what I called them. But anyway, that is what every yellow sticky trap I have put out in a soybean field looks like. Now, thankfully, none of those are rootworm beetles. So I'm not catching any rootworm beetles in soybeans with my traps, but every one of those little black things is a winged female aphid who grew wings only because they were overpopulated on the corn plant they were on somewhere. And they are looking for a new corn plant to infest. Now, these happen to, have the misfortune of flying into my glue trap. And so I took out about, 187,000 of them with that trap. But that's a drop in the bucket. I've never seen that before. We put yellow sticky traps out in soybean fields every year for the last several years. Every trap I've got out and every trap anybody has shown me looks exactly like that. And when I see that, I'm like, holy crap, the aphid population is just off the charts high, because you've got that many, every one of those, think about it, every one of those, wherever they came from, they were overpopulated. That's the only reason they've got wings and flew away. So that was sobering for me to realize that. So we'll move on to a disease update. So good news for corn producers. We still are having a hard time finding tar spot. So that's a good thing. It's a surprising thing to me, frankly, and I still think, I've been saying this for about a month now, and maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I still think long before black layer, you'll be able to walk into a cornfield and easily find tar spot on every leaf on the plant. But the closer we get to black layer, before that happens, the less opportunity that disease has to impact our yield. So the fact that we still have a hard time finding tar spot, that's good. And some of this, Adam, you got any corn denting yet? You found any dented corn?
I actually haven't found any denting yet.
I bet you got some
surprised
somewhere.
if I don't have some.
So Adam's got corn that's going to black layer in about 3 weeks. Tar spot doesn't have time to hurt that crop. Now, my May 22nd planted corn that's still pollinating, tar spot's got plenty of time to hurt that crop yet. Now, I can't find any in it, so it's going to have to hurry up. But, this later planted corn can still be pretty severely impacted by late diseases like southern rust and tar spot. I found a little bit of northern lately, which is not what I was expecting to find. I would expect to find southern rust. I would expect to find tar spot. Instead, I'm finding northern. Not enough to hurt anything, but I found it. I found a little bit of gray leaf spot. I found a little bit of common rust. I haven't actually seen any southern yet myself. It's probably out there somewhere. But by and large, this crop is still incredibly healthy, great color, and people are starting to recognize that, holy crap, this could be really, really, really good. And we're in a pretty good moisture situation. We had places that caught some surprise pop-up rains yesterday. there's a pretty good cell, working through just southwest of where Adam and I are at right now. Did you drive through any rain this morning, Adam?
A little bit.
Yeah. So we continue to catch rain. I mean, there are places that are a little drier than others, but honestly, we've probably had more people that have lost yield due to too much rain than too little rain. So it's, we've had pretty good moisture this year. And, I know you get frustrated. You hear the stories about flooding. You see the flooding. You see the yellow areas. You see the ponds. You that whole rain makes grain thing that the market talks about. And agronomically that, well, this field has been ruined by too much moisture, and yet the market's going down because it's raining. Well, the unfortunate reality is that for every acre that's ruined by too much moisture, there's probably 5 or 10 acres that are going to be better because of that moisture. And so that old saying that rain makes grain, in the big picture of things, actually is true. And this crop has tremendous potential if it stays healthy. Now, what it's going to take to maximize things from here on out, we'll talk about that when we talk about yield components in a minute. Got some questions coming in, Adam, or is that just you chatting with people?
Yeah, Tom just made a comment, following up on the aphid thing. He says last time we had aphids was when we used to hold the flag for the airplane.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Well, that's a job I'm glad we don't have to do anymore. Yeah. You remember when they used to throw toilet paper out the window, and it would flutter down, and that would, I kind of wonder how accurate we were with our applications back in those days, but I guess we thought it was better than nothing. So that's a good analogy though, Tom. It's a good indication of how infrequently aphids are a problem. I mean, this might be the worst year on record for aphids, but you and I might be retired before we have another aphid year. And so I'm gonna, you're gonna say I'm just sticking up for my hybrid that's gonna have a bad year. But if you have a hybrid that's disappointing because of aphids, I think that would be a poor reason to quit planting that hybrid, because in that hybrid's lifetime, the chances of aphids being a problem again pretty low. So if you like that hybrid for other reasons, I would keep planting that hybrid for the reasons you liked it in the first place, and I wouldn't get down on it because maybe it gets destroyed by aphids this year. And I'll say that for any company's hybrid, not just my own. So appreciate the comment, Tom. I love the historical reference. So I won't I won't tell anybody that you were only 5 when you were holding the flag for the plane. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about components of yield. So what drives yield? So the first thing that drives yield in corn is ear count. You got to have population to maximize yield in corn. If you look at the NCGA results every year, those guys are not planting. My dad planted 26.1 on his John Deere 7000 planter for a lot more years than he should have, because the next step up was 27.7. And that was, that 1,600 seed increase was like, ooh, that's a little too rich. That's too big of a jump. And it was weird with the planter. It was kind of a poor design on that, because there was a 1,600 seed jump, and then the next 3 settings after that were like 150 apart. So there was this huge jump right there, and a lot of guys hung out there for a long time, longer than they should have, because that 1,600 seed jump on the sprocket, that was a big jump, and it was a big percentage increase. But we're looking at 34, 35, 36,000 ear count, in a good field of corn these days. Now, some of this early planted corn and some of this Mother's Day weekend corn that kind of struggled a little bit, you're probably not going to have that ear count. Now, your mid-May corn, you probably got, damn near every seed you planted, turned into a plant with an ear. So you might find some fields with 36,000 good ears. You might find a field with 29,000 good ears. And the number of ears is the number one driver. That's already set. You're stuck with what you got. If you're walking out there now going, oh damn, I should have replanted this field. Too late to do that now. Remember that for next time. So we've also already determined rows around. That's determined when the corn plant's about yay tall. So that was a long time ago. That's primarily genetically determined. I've had people, I had a guy the other day that he pulled into a cornfield, and for the first 100 yards, he forgot to change the setting in his monitor. So he was planting corn set for soybeans. And so the first 100 yards of corn is 120,000. And he's actually pretty shocked that he's got ears on the corn at 120,000. I told him it was unfortunate. It wasn't enough acres for an NCGA entry, so he won't be able to do that. But there's 16 around ears. So even though there were 120,000 of them, those plants were feeling good enough when they were this tall to set a ear with normal girth. Now they're only 20 long. So by the time it was determining length, which is the next step in the process, it had figured out, holy crap, I got way too damn many neighbors here. I'm crowded. Those corn plants wish they could grow wings and fly someplace else because they were trapped there in that really high population. So those ears are really short. The kernels are going to be tiny. They're going to tip back. You know, I did a quick yield check for him based on the ear that he showed me. It yield checked about 320. So, you know, he's going to be okay. I did tell him I would target that for a high moisture harvest, I believe, because it's not going to stand that long. But anyway, he was impressed that this actually got ears on it. But now from here on out, so if you're in Adams territory and, you know, almost all the corn is past R3. When you get past R3, kernel abortion is done. So you've got what you've got. That plant cannot abort any more kernels. And the only way you can influence yield from here on out is how heavy, how big does that kernel get? And what kind of conditions are going to favor big, heavy kernels? So good moisture would be number one. Good plant health would be number two. Cool nights would be number three. And getting from where you're at to black layer slowly, which relates to temperature and relates to health. If that plant takes its time, every day that it spends getting to black layer is another day that you can pack more weight into that kernel. Now, I won't, you know, I know Adam wants to go there, but we won't bring up test weight versus kernel weight and get into that discussion. But you're dealing with a couple gentlemen here today that love to have that fight, and we'll have that fight another day. But we're talking kernel weight, which has nothing to do with test weight. Kernel weight is what's going to drive yield because the number of kernels you're going to have can't change that. But how big they are, you can still change that. So there's a lot of talk about, you know, I heard a weather report the other day talk about intense heat moving into the Corn Belt. You know, my forecast says the intense heat's 93 degrees. That's like normal. That's not intense. I mean, yeah, it's not great fat guy weather. Yeah, I like it when it's cooler too. So does the corn plant. But 93 is not going to ruin this corn crop. 72 at night is not going to ruin this corn crop. Now, would 62 at night be better? Yes. A couple nights in the low 70s is not going to turn this crop into an average crop. Is it going to take 5 bushel off of it? Probably. Drag you all the way down to 280. You know, so there is some scary good corn out there. And you can talk all you want about the dry places, the flooded places, and the warm nights, and you're not going to make the market respond to what you're talking about because it's pretty obvious to a satellite, a plane, or just the naked eye driving down the road, this crop looks pretty good. And it is pretty good. You know, and as we talked earlier, the biggest yield robber we got right now is the aphid. Because you're not gonna, you know, that's going to be the yield limiter in a lot of fields, honestly, because it's not going to be moisture. Right now, it doesn't look like it's going to be disease. There's still potential for that, but right now it doesn't look like it. You know, and this crop is as good as it looks, as long as, you know, your aphids don't get out of hand. But whatever we can do to keep that plant happy, keep that plant healthy, keep it from dying prematurely. You know, if it dies 2 weeks early from crown rot or tar spot, well, it's going to lose a lot of yield because you were 2 weeks away from black layer. If you die a day before black layer, you're going to get most of your yield. You're going to have a crappy stalk because before the plant gives up and dies, it has already cannibalized itself. And so your stalk quality is going to be crap. But if it lives, you know, if it was going to black layer on Thursday and it dies of some ailment on Wednesday, you're going to get 99 point some percent of your yield potential. If you die a week before black layer, you might get 90% of your yield. If you die 2 weeks before black layer, you might get 80 or 85% of your yield. And you know, when you're raising 280 bushel corn, a percentage is 2.8 bushel. 10% is 28 bushel. 20% is 56 bushel. I'm old enough that used to teach math, so I could do that in my head. So anyway, they add up fast when you're calculating off of a 250 plus bushel yield. So 10 and 20% is a big deal. You're still raising good corn, but if you remember back to 21, you know, I did a field day. I think it was like August 12th for a dealer in 2021, and I remember talking to his customers at this field day about how great the crop looked, and like 2 weeks later it was dead. And people had been out in July and early August walking out of fields with big smiles on their faces with these 260, 270, 280 yield checks. And then we raised a lot of 215, 220, 225, 230 corn. And you were 60 bushel short of your yield check and wondering, what the hell happened? Well, that plant was on a trajectory to accomplish something. And then it got derailed by a combination of crown rot, southern rust, and tar spot, and it died early. And when you die early, you don't get time to pack all the weight you can pack into that kernel. And instead of 70,000 great big fat heavy kernels making a bushel, takes 90,000 of, you know, medium-sized kernels to make a bushel. And when you change that factor in the yield formula by 20,000 kernels, that changes your yield about 40 or 50 or 60 bushel, depending on what yield level you're at. So same thing going on with soybeans. So soybeans, just like corn is ear count, soybeans driven by pod count. So if you walk into a field of beans and open them up and you pull a plant and you start counting pods and you get to 60 or 70 pods and you're getting tired of counting and you're not done, that's going to be some really good beans. If you start counting and you get to 37 and you run out of pods, you know, that's not going to be good. You can't make the seed big enough and you can't put enough beans in a pod to make a bean with 37 pods, you know, produce much more than 40, 45 bushel, probably. You know, a pod per bushel it's not a perfect science by any means, but a pod per bushel is a close way to do a quick, dirty, meaningless yield check in a field of soybeans. And if you're getting 70, 80, 90 pods on a bean plant, you know, feel really good about what you've done there. If you're getting 40, 50 pods on a bean plant, you know, I hope you didn't sell 70 bushel because you're probably going to be short of that. So after pod number is seeds per pod, which anybody know what the average is on that? It's about 2.6, I believe, is about the average beans per pod on a soybean plant. You got a lot of threes, few fours if things are going right for you. Hopefully not too many ones and twos, but the average is going to be less than 3. So you've got pods per plant, seeds per pod, and then the last thing is how big's the bean going to be? And bigger, heavier beans are just like bigger, heavier corn kernels. They're going to give you more yield. Now, planting big seed does not mean they're going to be big when you grow them. And I do not believe, there are other people who argue with me, I do not believe that big seeded beans have more yield potential than, I mean, tofu beans have, you know, anybody ever grown specialty tofu beans? They look like marbles. I mean, they're like 2,000 seeds per pound. I think you got to be like 2,100 or bigger to qualify as a tofu bean. They don't yield worth a crap, but they got really, really big seeds. There is no correlation between seed size genetically and yield. Now, if you create an environment through your management or your weather that makes your seed big, yeah, that's going to increase yield. But one has nothing to do with the other. And people get that confused all the time because we talk about bigger beans yielding more. Well, they do. But it doesn't matter what the genetic size of the bean is. But if you can keep that plant alive, feed that plant, keep that plant healthy, and keep it growing longer, and every day longer that it grows, it makes that bean a little bigger, yeah, it's going to yield more. But that has nothing to do with the size of the seed when you planted it. And it has nothing to do with the average seed size of the variety, because a plant can only produce so many pounds of grain, corn, beans, either one. And it's going to produce however many pounds the environment that it's in will allow it to do. And if you're a bean plant, let's say you're a bean plant and you can make a pound of seed is what you're able to do in the environment you're in. It doesn't matter whether you got one big ass bean that weighs a pound or 1,000 itty bitty little BBs that weigh next to nothing. It's still making a pound of dry matter. It's just, is it in a few big ones or a whole bunch of small ones? It's a pound is a pound the world around, as they say, unless it's a kilogram, and we won't go there. So anyway, that's what's driving yield from here on out would be seed count, seed size, and the weight of those seeds. And maximizing that is keeping that plant healthy, keeping that plant well watered, keeping that plant fed, protecting it from insects. We've talked all season long about this being a bad insect year, and it's done nothing but get worse since we started talking about that. So we started out with alfalfa weevils, worst I've ever seen them. There were guys that sprayed their first cutting of hay twice just to keep the weevils out of it. And then we had plenty of cutworm, and then we had the worst stink bug year I've ever seen. And then we had a lot of corn rootworm beetles, and we had quite a few Japanese beetles. And now we got the worst aphid, year I've ever seen. So we're up to between alfalfa weevil, stink bug, and now aphid. That's the third species that it's the worst I've ever seen in 1 year. So this is, you blame it on the warm winter, blame it on, whatever you want to. I don't think you can blame it on Trump, but you can try. Blame it on whatever you want to. This is a really bad, bug year. And I think this is a year where being a little more aggressive than normal about protecting our crop from insects will pay big dividends in yield. Anything coming in, Adam?
No, one thing I'd say back to yield components.
You're a yield component guy,
yeah. One other thing, maybe just to touch on Lance with the yield component thing is, I get phone calls about, hey, my corn's 14 around with a dismal, and then I get, but this one over here was 20 around.
Oh, that's a winner. That's a winner.
I just, maybe you should hit on the importance of rows around being not as important as
that's very good.
Think they
are. So Adam, you do the math for me here. So how many kernels on a 14 by 40? Is that 560?
560, yep.
Yep. And on a 16 by 36?
576.
And let's say we got an 18 by 32.
576.
That was a bad example. Let's say we got let's say you are David Hula and you got a 20 by 40. 800. And I'm going to throw one more up here. So let's say this would be kind of more of a normal. Let's say you got an 18 by 28.
504.
Okay. The chances of every one of those ears producing the same amount of dry matter is pretty good. But every one of those ears, with the exception of these two, is going to give you a different yield check when you plug it into your formula. And the reason why these ears will produce relatively the same amount of yield is these will be the smallest kernels And these will be the biggest kernels. And that is true regardless of what the genetics is, regardless of what the hybrid is. It is. If you break plants down into the yield components, and there's only one man in this room that has ever done that, and that is Adam. When he worked for Dr. Belo, that's what they do. The more kernels you have on an ear, the smaller they're going to be. Now, you may have more total weight on that ear, but the individual kernel weight is going to be less. So if you want to get really accurate in your yield checks, you should normally use a smaller factor on slender ears, because a slender ear is usually not going to count as good as a girthy ear, but you can raise just as many bushels on an acre of 14 row ears as you can 20s. So I usually tweak my formula a little bit. If you've got a really fat, girthy eared hybrid that throws 20s and 22s, you know, better not use 68,000 as your divisor on that hybrid. This one, 68,000 might be the right number. And if you start playing with that factor, you're going to see these two yield checks come together a lot more. So that's a good call out from Adam. That guys get depressed about 14 row ears. Now I will, at some point you are in trouble. You know, it's hard to make a 12 yield competitively unless it's like 50 long. But if you're 14 and up, you're okay. You know, 14 row ears are fine. And 18 row ears are often not better. They make you feel better. They make you think, oh, I did something good because I got lots of 18s. But they're probably going to have smaller kernels, and they're probably going to make about the same amount of corn as the 14.
Yeah. So don't get down the dumps if you're out there doing counts and you've only got 14s and some 16s, you know.
Yep.
There's more to it than just that.
And we also, you know, we talk about, you know, what can we do to increase ear, row number on an ear? I mean, not much, to be honest with you. I mean, a plant can be going through absolute hell. Like my friend that's got 120,000 corn plants. By the time those plants are this tall, they know they're screwed. And they didn't lose any rows around. They're still 16. Because when he caught the problem and lowered the population down to the 36,000 he wanted to be at, those are 16 row ears also. That hybrid is a 16 row hybrid. Row number is 95% genetically controlled. If that plant's going through hell, you might lose 2 rows. If you are David Hula, you might gain 2 rows. You know, so if you create the best environment in the world, you might gain a couple rows. If you put on no fertilizer, let it grow full of weeds, and just treat it like, you know, awful, you might lose 2 rows. Plus or minus 2, that's all you're going to do. The rest of it's all genetics. Now row length is a lot more, you know, you have more control over that. And then you probably have the most control, frankly, over kernel weight. Because your good management, keeping that plant alive the whole season, feeding it season long, protecting it season long, giving it the most opportunity to pack as much weight as it can into that kernel, that's probably what you're going to influence the most. Row number is genetic. Row length is management plus environment. Kernel weight is management plus environment. Agree?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, all right.
Agree.
That's good, because you know more about this than I do. So yeah, I like it. I like it when you agree.
I would agree.
Okay, so we're down to one of my favorite soapbox topics here.
You know me, I'd tell you if I didn't agree.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He's not bashful. So, I won't ask for a show of hands how many have been spraying something you shouldn't be spraying in soybean fields for the past 2 to 3 weeks. But I've seen the tracks, and I've seen the yellow bean fields, and I've seen some weeds getting kind of brown and making you think they're going to die. I've seen signs that something's been going on out there. So, so let's talk. And I know a lot of people are frustrated, and nobody's got a field of corn or beans almost as clean as you would like them to be. Let's be honest, we're pretty spoiled with the level of weed control that we expect to be able to achieve. And it's getting harder for us to achieve the level of weed control that we expect to be able to achieve. And I think a lot of people are mistakenly thinking that something different than what you did would have been better. And the people who did something different than what you did, they think what you did probably would have been better. So everybody's thinking somebody else has got a better system than what they did because what I did sucks and something else has got to be better. Sometimes the something else would have sucked more than what you did. So it's hard. I get it. We can't fix everything like we used to be able to. And you've probably heard me talk about weed management before. A good friend and colleague of ours, Randy McElroy from Southern Illinois. Randy's been talking about weed management for years. And I used to think that Randy was, being a little hokey with his preaching about weed man, and he actually is a preacher. So when he preaches, it's legit. But I've realized he was just ahead of his time. And managing weeds is different than killing weeds. We are in a situation today where we just can't kill every weed that's out there. If you manage them and prevent them from being there, that's going to be better than letting them be there and then trying to kill them. And we went through about a 20-year period in the early days of Roundup Ready technology when there wasn't a damn thing we couldn't kill. You could let it get chest high if you want to, and then kill it. You could let it get knee high if you want to, and then kill it. You could prevent it from coming up back then too, but we weren't worried about preventing it from coming up because we knew we could kill it. Well, we got a little bit too much of that. Well, I think I can still kill it mentality in mind. So I'm gonna walk through what we know based on years of research and based on observation we need to do to have good weed control in soybeans. So we're going to start out with something that rarely exists that we call a clean field. So a clean field, if you do tillage, your field's probably not clean. It's mostly clean. And if you're doing vertical tillage, your field is not clean at all. If you're doing a burn down and a no-till field, that's probably the closest we get to a clean field if we're doing a good burn down. If you do a fall burn down and no spring burn down, you might not have a clean field. If you do tillage, there's usually some tillage escape weeds. And yeah, there might only be 4 of them left in an acre, but it's not a clean field. So whether you're doing tillage or no-till with a burn down, you got to start with a clean field. We need to start with a residual program capable of giving you 85 to 90% weed control. There probably needs to be multiple modes of action against water hemp in that program. And I'm going to say the strongest programs on the marketplace are PPOs plus metribuzin. And if you got a burr up, you know what about PPOs, and you don't like PPOs because of the potential for crop response, and you say, I'm not using PPOs anymore, just recognize you are not using the best chemistry to control water hemp. Second best option would be a group 15 of some kind, plus metribuzin. The plus metribuzin part is important in that pre. Both of these programs have to be on before the beans come up because this can't go over the top of a bean and this can't go over the top of a bean. If you restrict yourself to soil residuals that can go over the top of beans, you are giving up the 2 best water hemp programs on the marketplace. And you're taking a big risk by using a pre that's not a very good pre, in my opinion. The next thing you need to do is you need to spray your post trip within 3 to 5 weeks of this. Now, I'm stretching it out to 5 because if you plant your beans April 1st, 5 weeks is about May 7th, May 5th-ish. How many of you are doing your post-pass in the first half of May? If you're planting beans early, your post-pass should be in the first half of May. And you should be posting fields that are essentially clean, and the biggest weed in the field is less than 4 inches tall. And I don't care what herbicide program you're using, that is still true. And this post needs to have an additional group 15 residual. Then I'm going to say 10 days after this pass, whenever that is, we need to scout and look for the presence of one of two things. Either newly emerged weeds, because this didn't get activated in time to prevent new emergence, or any injured weed that you think is not going to die. If you find either of those things, you need to retreat that field as soon as possible. If you don't find a newly emerged weed or any weed escapes, you need to continue scouting that field periodically up until canopy. If at canopy the field is clean, the field will stay clean. These fields that are not clean, that have got waist-high beans with a water hemp plant sticking up a foot above waist-high beans, do any of you actually think that that weed is 2 weeks old? If you do, we need to talk. That weed is 2 months old. That weed was most likely an escape on this pass. The way you can tell if a water hemp was a late emerger or an escape is very easy. If that water hemp plant looks something like that, with a stalk that's my pinky size or less in diameter, that's a late emerger. If the water hemp plant looks more like this, and he's a bush with big branches, and he's got a stem size of my thumb, I'm sorry, Charlie, that's not a late emerging weed. We missed him here. We just pissed him off is all we did.
Yeah, you hit him, but you didn't.
Yeah, we hit him, you know. And this will work. And I can hear some of you screaming at me, well, I sprayed Liberty on small weeds and I missed them. That can happen. We'll talk about maximizing the performance of Liberty here in a minute in a separate conversation. But for every time it misses small weeds, it misses big weeds about 10 times more often than it misses small weeds. So this getting a good pre on, getting your post on before your good pre has fallen apart, scouting that field about 10 days after that post trip, assessing how good the post trip worked, and if it didn't work very good, fix it then, not now. All these weeds that somebody's been doing something they shouldn't have been doing to the last 3 weeks could have been resprayed 8 weeks ago when they were that tall. And it would have worked better. It would have stressed your beans less. It would have been on label. It would have been all sorts of good things. And again, this message is not for, dicamba bean people. This is not for enlist people. This is for soybean growers. The conventional bean grower, he's known this a long time. If you want to know how to manage your enlist acres, talk to your neighbor who grows conventional beans. If you want to know how to manage your XtendFlex acres, talk to your neighbor who grows conventional beans. Those guys are better weed managers because they had no choice but to become a better weed manager. Those of us who are used to our post program fixing everything, we had the luxury of kind of being half-ass weed managers, but we're losing that luxury. And the more poorly we manage things, the faster we're going to lose it. So let's transition into the second half of this message. And that is, I don't think Liberty worked as good as it needs to. Why is that? So if you want to maximize performance of Liberty, we're going to start with the right rate, which is 36 ounces plus. 43 ounces is the most you can do by label in one shot. 20 gallon per acre carrier minimum. And I don't want to hear, well, 17 is close to 20, or, well, I can get more acres with 15, or I used to do 10, so 15 is pretty high, right? No, 20 minimum. And if you're doing something silly now, 30 would be better. What else? Small weeds. Small weeds are 4 inches or less. Emphasis on the less. So that's going to be early applications. 3 pounds, my retail friends will love me here. 3 pounds of real AMS. Cut the plastic bag open, dump it in. 3 pounds to the acre. It's better. Tank mix it with Roundup. That helps more than anybody would imagine. And you might say, well, what the hell is that going to do to water hemp? Roundup hadn't killed water hemp for 10 years. I don't know, but it's better. And it definitely helps on everything that's not a water hemp. So, Liberty's not great on giant ragweed. Liberty's not great on velvet leaf. Liberty's not great on a lot of stuff. It's pretty damn good on water hemp. But it's not great on a lot of stuff that Roundup still kills. And there's something about those two products together. They help each other in some way. And if you can do it, it's nice to do it on a warm, humid, sunny day. I wouldn't wait around until your weeds are a foot tall trying to catch a warm, humid, sunny day. But it's going to work better on a warm, humid, sunny day, typically. Am I missing anything on my list? So coverage. So we got to have. I don't really think you have to make a fog, because fogs go everywhere. And I've seen a lot of road ditches killed. I've seen lots of corn damaged. I've seen, we're probably fogging it more than we need to. You need volume more than you need a fog. But you need good coverage. So you can't use the nozzles that you were using when you were spraying dicamba. Don't do that. But if it's just floating on the breeze behind the sprayer, it doesn't need to do that either. We need good coverage. We need the 20 gallon. If you can haul more is better. 20 is a minimum, and don't cheat on that. That's one of the most common mistakes people make is they do math. Well, if I cut it back to 16, I can get this whole farm done on one load. Well, you might be doing it twice if you do that. So 16 is better, and I think, well, it's just 2 gallons. What difference is that going to make? It might make a difference. So don't cheat on the 20. Use the right rate. Where we're at with Liberty today is where we're at with Roundup 10 years ago. More is better. Now, Roundup got to the point on water hemp where more wasn't better. It didn't matter. It wasn't going to kill it. And I'm afraid we're going to get there with Liberty too. But right now, we're still in the stage of more is better. Now, if you do all this other stuff right, you might not need more. But this is how to make Liberty work the best. And if you do these things when you're spraying your Liberty, and you do the other things, as part of your total program, you're not going to be asking your retailer to do something they shouldn't do and clean up your soybean field when you're spraying your fungicide. So just as a reminder, what's the label for Roundup, Adam? I'm going to quiz you.
Through R1, R2.
R2. So it's R2. What's Enlist?
Through R1.
Yep. And what's Liberty?
Through R1 as well, isn't it?
Uh-huh. So R1, which is beginning flower. R2 is full flower. No pods at that time. And, you know, probably the least mature bean you're going to find today is an R3, and there's R4s out there. So if you're asking somebody to put one of these two products on an R4 soybean, you're 3 growth stages off label. That ain't just a little bit. So the three reasons. Glad we built this soapbox stout, Adam. I'm going to spend a lot of time on it today. So I'm begging people to live with some weeds. Unless you can't see your beans for the weeds, unless they're so bad you don't think you can get it through the combine, I would just leave it alone. We'll live to fight another day. It will hurt your pride. You know, we talk when I go to church on Sundays, we talk about pride a lot. You know, I have a big problem with that myself. So I understand. But there's 3 reasons why we shouldn't be out there trying to kill weeds now. Reason number 1, it's off label. We don't do that. Reason number 2, it's going to hurt your beans. Reason number 3, and if you don't care about this one, you should. I know there's some of you that would be willing to give up 5 bushel of beans to make the field look better. But here's the big one here. It won't kill the weeds. You know, if you're willing to break the law, you know, shame on you. If you're willing to give up 4 or 5 bushel of yield, that doesn't make any economic sense. But the biggest problem is it ain't going to work. You know, if it would work, I can understand why you might be tempted to do the first 2, but it's not going to work. So just let them go. Let them make some seed. There's already a bazillion water hemp seeds in every acre of every field. Adding a couple 100,000 to the bazillion that's there is not going to change your life. Every field out here, if you didn't plant a crop in it and spray any herbicide on it, I got an example of this. I've got a field of new CRP. I just mowed it for the first time. We just seeded it 2 months ago. This farm has been in CRP. We had to reseed it, but it's been in CRP for, close to 30 years. When we last farmed this field, water hemp didn't exist. What do you think I mowed down? Solid water hemp on a field that we've never fought water hemp in. It's been in grass for 30 years. Now it is in a river bottom, I'll be honest with you. So probably washed a little bit of seed in from somewhere. But I mean, water hemp is everywhere. And I don't care how clean your fields are, they're full of water hemp too in the soil. So I know you think you're a bad farmer if you let weeds go to seed. I know you've maybe never let weeds go to seed in the last 25 years. I know it hurts. But unless you're going to walk out there with a backpack sprayer on and squirt something on it that can actually kill it or pull it, it's going to make some seed. And there's nothing you can spray on it today that's going to change that. So let's do better next year. We can do better next year. We're going to spend all winter talking about weed control strategies to do better next year. But you got just a little taste of that here on Ask the Agronomist today. So appreciate your time. We're over time. Any questions coming in,
No.
Adam? Okay, you're all just sick of listening to me. So we'll give it a rest. Keep an eye on your aphids. If you need to treat for them, make sure you're using the right product. Stay safe. Avoid the wind and hail storms, and hopefully we can get this crop to the finish line and it ends up being as good as it looks. So everybody take care.